All right, so it is 7 o'clock on the dot, and Carrie, I think we can go ahead and get started here. So,
Let's do it.
welcome to our webinar, Érase una vez, Bring Spanish to Life Through the Power of Storytelling. I'm Kristy Placido, and I'm here with my good friend, Carrie Toth. And just introduce ourselves really quickly before we get right into it. I taught high school Spanish. Well, I taught middle school Spanish for 1 year, but we won't talk about that. Um, I
Like
taught high
Bruno.
school Spanish and 1 year of middle school Spanish for a total of 25 years. And I retired from classroom teaching 3 years ago, and I now work for Wayside Publishing as a managing editor. If you use any of Wayside's readers in your classroom, those come from my team. And one of the things I'm really proud of about my team is we are all either teachers or longtime former teachers. And Carrie is one of my contractors and also one of our authors. And I am just really proud of the work that we do. And I hope that you enjoy it as well. Carrie, would you introduce yourself for us?
I'm Carrie Toth. I am in Illinois, so they're keeping me in my classroom for longer than Michigan. So this is year 32, and I have this year and 2 more to go. So I'm a sophomore this year. And then I'll join Kristy among the ranks of the retired. I love teaching. I will miss it, of course. But man, it's been a long, wild road. This year is great. I hope you guys are all having a really great year. I feel like finally all of the post-COVID wildness has kind of settled a little bit, and we're having a really great year in my room this year. And so I'm excited to share this with you because I use a lot of readers. We're reading Kristy Frida Kahlo in level 3, and we're reading a really easy read for them, My Toucan, in level 4, but I have several that are interested in health careers and veterinary medicine. And so we're going to kind of go at an easy story, but then do some kind of in-depth vocab digging. So hopefully we can give you lots of ideas for using readers tonight.
Nice. Thanks, Carrie. So this webinar, we are going to be sharing some examples from readers that Wayside publishes. And we do have a new product that just came out. It's called Érase una vez, and it's a reader-based Spanish 1 through 4 program. So we're going to be sharing some examples that come from that program and the readers in the program. But I hope that you will feel inspired to take the things that we're talking about tonight and apply them to whatever your own situation is, whatever curriculum you use. And hopefully you'll find some ideas for some activities that you can go back to your classroom and implement right away. And hopefully you'll feel a little bit excited after hearing our ideas, and you'll be kind of feeling like, oh, I can't wait to get back to school so I can try some of these things. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar. And first thing that I want to just bring to everyone's attention, this may be something that you've heard before, but a very large percentage of the average person's vocabulary comes from reading. And the more you read, the more avid of a reader you are, the likelihood is that you'll have an even larger vocabulary. I mean, it kind of makes sense. And we know that approximately 70% of a literate person's vocabulary comes from the reading that they do. What we also know is that in a language class, when you're reading in your second language, in order for that reading to result in actual language development, that reading has to feel effortless. So it really shouldn't feel like hard work. And Carrie just mentioned that she has her level 4 students reading a level 1, 2, pretty easy reader. They're going to fly through that. And they're going to feel like that was absolutely effortless. However, it's still going to result in language acquisition for them. They're still getting exposed to all of that syntax and all of those vocabulary words. They're going to be vocabulary words that they didn't know. There might be some specialized vocabulary there. So Carrie's going to be able to take that and develop it into robust discussions, and she can expand on that. And she's going to be able to do amazing things. So the reading did not have to feel difficult in order for it to be really impactful. And we also know from research that language, if a student is just opening a book and reading independently, we know that the language in the reader needs to be 98% comprehensible. And there's been some more recent studies that have even shown that it should be closer to 100 than that. So if it's 98% comprehensible, that is what it takes for the reader to be able to acquire new vocabulary. And the reason for that is they need rich context around any of the words that are new for them. If there's not abundant amount of context, they're going to have a lot of trouble acquiring any new vocabulary. So it is just key that we're getting comprehensible reading materials in front of our students. And that's not to say that students are going to do that forever. I mean, our goal is for students to eventually be reading authentic texts. We just don't want to make them never read, never read, never read. And then suddenly in level 4, they're immersed in all of these authentic texts. Like, that's just kind of not fair. So we want reading to be very comprehensible. Also, we're going to talk to you about how to do that. Yeah, Carrie, go ahead.
It also is important to know that according to the literacy studies in the United States, we have about 54% of the population that are reading at a 6th grade level or below. So if you look at what that means for their vocabulary, they are literate. We have about a 79% literacy rate overall, but 54% are below that 6th grade level. That means that their cognates and things that we might take as givens, they may not be for our students. And so, having that easier read or the more comprehensible read really does help, because their literacy may not be really high in their first language.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what Carrie and I are going to be walking you through tonight is, what does the reading cycle look like? And the reading cycle is going to be the same whether you're reading a reader or whether you're reading a current event or a story or whatever the case may be. It's always going to follow these same steps. So the first step is pre-reading. And during pre-reading, and we're going to break this all down for you, during pre-reading, we're going to do things like, we're going to introduce new vocabulary. We're going to do PQA, which stands for personalized questions and answers. I like to just call it chit chat or small talk. We're just going to take whatever vocabulary we know the students are going to be experiencing in whatever they're going to be reading, and we try to make small talk using that vocabulary. We want the students to be able to hear the vocabulary being used in context prior to reading it. A big one for me personally, and I know Carrie does this as well, is prediction activities. And that could vary anything from looking at a word cloud and making predictions, looking at images from the reader, looking at the cover of the reader. Another one that we really love to include in our teacher's guides is map talk. So what that involves is just having students look at a map on a piece of paper as the teacher talks about the map and features of that geographical location, and the students interact with the map by drawing on it, writing things down as the teacher's talking. Doing a preview of maybe something cultural that they're going to be experiencing in the reading. So if there's something that you're kind of like, oh, this is going to seem kind of unusual for my students, I kind of feel like this is going to go over better if they have a little bit of prior knowledge before we jump right into the reading. Before reading is a great opportunity for you to give them a little bit of background information so that when they are actually doing the reading, it's not jarring to them. It's going to be like, oh, okay, this is familiar. This is what we were talking about earlier. And then the next thing we're going to talk about is during reading. How do we actually do reading in a classroom? So we're going to talk about how that looks, what kind of discussions we might be having as we're reading, some different ways that you can read with students to keep it fresh. And also we're going to talk a little bit about doing comprehension checks. And then finally, post-reading. Post-reading tends to be everyone's favorite. It tends to be the most fun. It also tends to be kind of the easiest part of the cycle to come up with ideas for activities. So we're going to touch on that a little bit, but we kind of, Carrie and I were talking about this. We kind of feel like the post reading is like the dessert, and we kind of want to focus on like the main nutrition, with the stuff that's really good for you. So the things that teachers tend to struggle with the most are the pre-reading and the during reading. So we're going to give you a little bit of dessert, but we're just going to touch on that a little bit tonight. So follow-up activities, how to get your students' eyes on the text, again, having discussion, playing games, doing fun activities, that kind of thing. So without further ado, Carrie is going to talk to you a little bit about planning and setting up your unit.
So the nice thing that if I'm going to do a reader, I really kind of want the planning to be taken out of it for me, because it takes a lot of time. If you get a new reader and you have to look through the chapters and find out, what words are new in this reader, how am I going to set it up? One of the things I've really liked about working, and of course I do work with Wayside as well as an author and as a contractor, was getting to create these prep for success units. So the first thing toward my planning is, when I looked at the readers, I thought, what is it that my students are going to be learning from this reader? And how can I front load that a little bit so that it's not as overwhelming, or so that they have a better chance of acquiring it as they're reading the text, because they've already kind of experienced it in a different context. So they have 3 little story vignettes. And again, teachers can pick and choose what they want to do. If you feel like your students know all of the vocabulary from the first section, then they go to the second. But it repeats a cycle, and it's the cycle that we want to do every time we're reading. It introduces some vocabulary, it uses the vocabulary in context, and then it follows up with, kind of not an assessment, but like a formative activity to show, hey, are they picking up any of what I've been giving them? So we start with the prep for success. Sometimes that takes 9 days. Sometimes I pick, just a couple of the days out of it to do. And then it's time, planning wise, to go on to the book. And with the book, I have the teacher's guide, and we have tons and tons of things in the teacher's guide that are great for you being able to pick whether you want to do a gamified or a comprehension. And then we get started reading.
So just going a little bit further into the planning aspect. So you may have plans and activities that are already created for you, depending on what materials you're using. You may also have to make some decisions yourself. And reasons for why you might have to make these decisions yourself. Well, every classroom is going to be unique. Every group of students is going to be a little bit different. So you might be looking through your materials, and maybe it's recommended that you pre-teach these 12 words. We predict these are going to be 12 words that your students are going to need to know before they start reading. Well, if your students if your students already know those words, or maybe you don't already have a list made up for you, you're going to have to think to yourself, okay, what would be like the baseline, most important set of maybe 12 to 15 words that I want to quickly teach my students before we even get started reading this book. So just ask yourself, how important are these words? So what we look at is the word high frequency. So is it used often? If you're just having conversations with people talking about everyday things, is that word something that's going to frequently come up in conversation? Is it useful? And these two kind of go hand in hand, but useful can vary depending on your situation. So what's useful for one student might not be that useful for another, depending on personal interests and things like that. If you're teaching, let's say you're teaching a group of adults who are all in law enforcement, they may need to know a word like lawyer. Whereas a high school student who's in level 1 Spanish, that's probably going to be a very low frequency and not very useful word for them. So ask yourself, where does this word fall in my list of priorities? Because we all know we have a limited amount of time to teach, and not every word is probably going to make the cut of something that we're going to spend a lot of time on. So ask yourself, is this word high frequency and useful enough that I want to do some intervention before we even pick up this book? Or is this word, okay, maybe this is kind of an important word, but this word is used a lot in this reading that we're going to be doing. I'm going to just let my students gradually acquire that word through repeated exposure to it, because the book we're reading does a really good job of recycling it. So just kind of ask yourself, like, where does this fall on my list of priorities? Is this going to take care of itself, or do I need to be doing something more with it? And it will come together for you. And I also just want to say, if there's a word that you didn't identify ahead of time and you never pre-taught it, it's still okay. Like, you can still work with that word at any point in the reading cycle. And I promise you, everything's going to be okay, because guess, I have a secret. Students don't acquire everything that we expect them to acquire. So it's all going to be okay.
So in the Prep for Success, we do vocabulary, it leads to storytelling, and it leads to retelling. We try to shake the vocabulary up a little bit. We have the Prep for Success PQA, the personalized question and answer chit chat slides, and we have some little games and activities that include things like Where Do You Dance?, where they're really talking about their own personal life.
Mm-hmm. And in this particular example here, you see some slides that are from a Four Corners activity. So you can see that we have some questions that you could just ask your students these questions as conversation, but it's also really fun to have them get up and do something with their bodies, maybe moving to, maybe you have a letter A in this corner and a B in this corner, etc., and actually have the students move depending on what their answer is. Or you could even have them have little cards with the letters A, B, C, and D, and have them hold up the letter that represents their own personal preferences or what they do. So there's lots of ways that you can make this kind of thing come to life. And even in a novice classroom, there are still lots of things you can do to keep your students in the language and really listening to lots of target language.
And then we do storytelling. And so this is just your basic old school TPRS type of storytelling, where you have a story that uses the vocabulary in context several times so that they're getting to hear it and hear it and hear it, not only in the story, but also in the retell. So when Kristy said earlier that we like to do predictions, one of the things we know is that to become that advanced low level proficiency, you have to be really good at knowing when to use present, past, and future. But the way that we've taught language sometimes divides that into level 1, level 2, level 3. But doing things like this, where you can tell the story in the present tense, and in this story, we have a kid named Juanito, you can tell it directly from this page, or you could go through and underline some details and say, hey, I think, I want to give my students some choice and make it more like story asking, where they're telling you extra details. But then the next day you can review it by retelling in the past tense. You don't necessarily want them to produce in all the tenses, but if you can get them familiar with what it sounds like to predict and what it sounds like to retell, then when you get to those, as you're doing your grammar pop-ups and grammar lessons, they already kind of have a framework to hang the rules on.
Yeah, like that seed was planted, right? And eventually it's going to grow.
Just watering it a bunch now. And then we do retells, and sometimes the retell is something where they're moving place to place. Like we do one called Around the World retell, where every time the music stops, they move to the next paper. And, we do one where they fold them up like snowballs and throw them and they retell. Sometimes the retell could be like, these are little cutout puppets. Like you can have them retell the story almost Reader's Theater style. So there's lots of ways to get that. Whether they're reading from a script because they don't know how to say things that they need to say for a retell, or whether they're just doing their best to kind of recreate the story to show you formatively what do they know so far. And then we have even things like these gamified, so it's a poster writing game. They have a vocab strip, and basically they're just taking the vocab strip, and it's a good scaffold because novices in particular are not great at coming up with sentences just off the top of their head. So maybe you give them a list of the keywords, and now they're putting them onto the poster and they're trying to write sentences that retell the story. Sorry about that.
Sorry, Carrie.
We introduced chapter themes. I'm struggling tonight. We introduced chapter themes early by connecting them to students' life. So our book, Yama and Lima, Yama is a zoo animal. So we're going to talk about the zoo. And Yama thinks that he does not really like being caged in the zoo. So he wants to visit the city. So he's going to visit the city of Lima, Peru. He's going to talk about all the things he likes and dislikes. We're going to meet a lot of different animals. It gets a deep look at friendships because his two friends don't really want to escape the zoo with him, but they do anyway. So there's a lot of themes that you can explore. And this is where it's great to have it a little easier read, because with my level ones and early twos, I might be, doing likes and dislikes and animals in the zoo. When I'm talking with my level 3s and 4s, you can really dig into friendship, like what makes, somebody a good or bad influence on you. Do you do what your friends do, no matter what it is? Their desire to explore. Llama just wanted to get out of his cage and go explore. Lima, do you desire to explore? The foods that you can do a simple foods and talk about what the animals ate that they shouldn't have that made them sick, or you can go more in depth and talk about like dietary lifestyle. Like you can use these as a bridge to teaching other content-based things that you have in your curriculum.
So one thing that I would just like to add when we're talking about pre-reading, I think a lot of teachers tend to want to do too much. Especially if you do have a teacher's guide or access to, maybe you've got some various curricular materials that you can choose items from. You don't have to do every single thing. And in fact, I think a lot of times if you try to do every single thing, it ends up just really belaboring what could have been a fun activity. And it just makes it kind of feel like, okay, we get it. We're ready to move forward. So you want to be really careful. You want to prepare your students, but at the same time, you don't want to spend so much effort preparing them that they're just like over it by the time you're actually introducing the chapter that they're going to read. So I would suggest choose one or two of these focus areas as you're pre-reading instead of trying to cover everything. Just because it's there doesn't mean you have to do it. So maybe introduce some new vocabulary words, and also talk to your students about making a comparison between some aspect of culture or some theme that's going to be happening in what you're about to read, and have them compare that with something that's similar in their own lives or in their own community. So don't worry about trying to do it all, but just select a couple of these so you can introduce a new vocabulary word or two. Maybe you realize, oh, I wish I had introduced this before we started reading the reader, but I didn't. So maybe you grab a fun little video that you find on YouTube that contains an easy way to reference that new vocabulary word, and you just talk to the students about what's happening in the YouTube video. Maybe it's a cultural element. Maybe you bring in an object or look at an image of something that represents a larger cultural theme that the students are going to be reading about, or even something that maybe is just kind of alluded to in the book that you want to go a little bit deeper into. Encourage students to make connections and comparisons to the text and with their own lives. Predictions are always going to be a win. And I love also finding ways to give students a little hook, like presenting something that is very intriguing to them that makes them kind of wonder or feel kind of excited about what's going to be happening next. So that doesn't even have to necessarily be like a language lesson or an aspect of a lesson. It could just be something as simple as maybe you're playing a certain type of music when they walk through the door. Like maybe the chapter has something suspenseful in it, and so you're playing music that sounds suspenseful. It's
Kristy's really great at doing that. Like, you're so good at that with the lighting and sometimes she'll put her background on her big screen as like the setting of whatever it is. And then she has her music playing, and it really is a hook. It's a hook for me when I watch her.
Yeah. And I mean, they'll say, oh, Mrs. Placido, you're so weird, but they love it when we're weird. So just be weird. We're language teachers. That's what we do.
Embrace it.
So we mentioned earlier that we, in our teacher's guides, we provide pre-reading discussion slideshows. I would recommend if, let's say there are 4 to 6 questions in a slideshow, I would say maybe choose like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 at the most that you think are going to be appealing to your students, and just do a little bit of chit chat using that slide. And it's easy if you don't see the question that you wanted to ask. I mean, it's really easy to come up, just pop your question on a Google slide and find a cool image to go next to it. And, for instance, what do you like to eat when you're really hungry? Have you ever been to a Chinese neighborhood? Where? Are there many restaurants in your community? Which one is your favorite? So in this chapter, Yama and his little animal friends that have all escaped from the zoo, they're going to be wandering into the Barrio Chino in Lima, and they're going to be eating some Chinese food. And it's, of course, that's not what the animals are used to eating. So they're going to get upset tummies and they're going to have to go see the vet. So, you can connect something silly like that to things that are actually real life in your students' lives. So, are animals eating Chinese food? Like, in reality, is that a conversation we're going to have? Probably not. But we do talk, I know Carrie and I do, we talk a lot about what food we want to eat and which restaurant we're going to go to. And, that is a very normal and natural type of thing to have a conversation about. So that's how you bring in the real life. Even though we're reading a story about animals escaping from the zoo, we're still going to be always connecting things back to our students. And I would be remiss if I didn't say this, and I think this is something that is so important, even if you've heard this 100 other times. We all need to hear it, and we all need to hear it every day. It's so important to go slowly and be very intentional with the way that you speak. We don't want to be overwhelming our students, and it's really, really easy for us to, get excited and feel like they're comprehending. And in reality, it might be like 5 out of 30 kids are really, really with us, and we get excited and we start going fast. It's so important to find ways to slow yourself down. And even if you have to write slow on a big poster board and post it on the back wall of your classroom to remind yourself, do whatever you got to do. It's all fair game. And the other thing, the affective filter. So I'm sure we've all learned about the affective filter at some point, but the affective filter just refers to when students' emotions are high, it prevents them from absorbing that comprehensible input that we're trying to deliver to them. So we don't have a ton of control over our students' emotions. I mean, we have really very, very little control over that. So it's so important that we try to set the stage and control as much of it as we possibly can. So we want our classroom to feel safe and welcoming, and we want our students to feel like they're going to be safe if they're trying, and we're not going to come in and cut them down and correct every error that they make. We're going to be encouraging to them. And we can't overcome everything, but if we do our best to make our classroom feel like a place where it's okay to take risks, a lot of that affective filter is going to be mitigated by our efforts. And we can't do it all. And, we have to accept our limitations, but whatever we can do, it's really important that we try. All right. So pre-reading. We have talked a lot about pre-reading, but why do we do this? Okay. We are focusing on predicting. We're activating prior knowledge, that's also known as schemas, and we're building new knowledge and context for our students. We know that when students have prior knowledge or prior experience with something, their comprehension goes way up. So if we're presenting something to our students that we know that they're not going to have any prior knowledge about, we're going to do what we can to give them some prior knowledge before they actually get into the reading. If we're doing things like that, it's going to give the students, it's going to give reading a purpose in our students' minds. They're going to they're going to recognize the things that we were talking about during the pre-reading activities, and they're going to say, oh, okay, I'm making a connection here. They're going to be wondering if they were doing a prediction activity prior to starting the reading, they're going to be engaged because they're going to be wondering, was my prediction right? Is this actually going to happen or not? And that little extra mental energy on the task is going to increase their comprehension. And it's also going to lead to more noticing things like the grammar and the structure of the language. And so just whatever we can do to get them, what do the kids say nowadays? Locked in. That's what we're trying to do. All right, Carrie, turning it back over to you.
So we actually did this just today with the book Toucan in my class, and yesterday with the book Frida. We want to guess, like, one way to pre-read is to do predictions. And Kristy talked about hooks, and sometimes a hook is just getting to see the characters and getting to see kind of the cover of the book and talk about their predictions, because it gives them some skin in the game. It gives them a stake. So we ask, what do you see on the cover of the book? And in a level 1, they can give you individual little things. And sometimes they might yell something in English. If it's a cognate, awesome, because you can show them really quickly that, autobus or even bus is bus, or llama for llama. You can ask them about the colors, like anything to just get them really connecting with it. When you look at this cover, what do you think? So when I look at it, I see the bus and I see a llama thinking about a bus, and I see that it's a llama in Lima. So it does make me start to think maybe a llama is going to ride a bus to Lima, which you have to admit, that's kind of an interesting thought. Like, how would the llama get on the bus? Like, that's some things that I can ask them. And that's why it's also fun to use an easier book at an upper level, because then they can come up with really, like, why would a llama want to ride a bus? Does a llama get on the bus and sit like with 2 legs in the air? The name is Llama and Lima. Make 2 predictions about what's going to happen. So we did that today. We made some really great predictions about Toucan. They came up with things I hadn't thought about. Like, they have seen the movie Rio, and they thought about the egg falling out of the nest at the beginning of Rio, or the baby bird falling out of the nest. They decided that this toucan is going to be an egg that fell out of the nest at the beginning of the book. So it's a fun way to get them predicting just using the cover of the book and nothing more. And then they can dig into, so Quite the Character is an activity where they actually are just looking at images directly from the book that are characters that they're going to meet. These are not events. These are just the characters. So they have a little bit of a chance to decide, this is going to be an important person in this story, an important character in the story. This one is going to cause problems for the others. That was really fun yesterday with Kristy's book, Frida, because they were looking at all of these illustrations of characters in the story. And there's a little Frida Kahlo riding a bike as an illustration. And the kids were positive that she was going to be the one causing problems for other people, because she just has kind of a mean mug in the illustration, mean expression on her face. And gonna save somebody in this story. This person will have an adventure. They saw an image with a girl standing on the side of the ocean with a ship in the distance. She did have an adventure, but maybe not quite what the students thought. This person is going to be cruel or a good friend. So they just write down the letter. There's no right or wrong, but it gives you something to go back and talk about, both as you read and at the end of the book. Oh, did you pick the doctor as the person that was going to save somebody? And then Bunch of Hunches actually is about events. Like, we give them images that are events throughout the story, and the students have to decide, is this where an animal is going to cause a lot of problems? The little monkey in the cage with thinking about soccer, is he going to cause, is this guinea pig going to cause problems? Who's going to be the animal? Maybe the kid pushing the emergency button is going to cause problems. So we have 3 levels. They can either have the pre-made hunches where we have 2 forms. One, they can write the letter, and one, we have bigger pictures that they can go and stick the hunches on. You can hang an envelope and they can drop the hunches in. Or you have sentence starters for upper level kids. They can actually make predictions and start them from sentences. So it's a scaffolded way to introduce the story.
And again, we don't recommend that you do all of these activities. So like, if you do Quite the Character, you probably don't also want to do a bunch of hunches.
Exactly.
Like, that's going to be a lot of overlap. So choose one, and maybe in the next chapter, do a different one. this is an example of a word cloud. So we made these, took some of the very basic vocabulary, lots of cognates, words that students may or may not already know. And they're going to look not only at the image, but they're going to also be looking for words that look familiar to them. And, they may just notice like surf and surfear and Peru. And, they might be like, the llama's going to go surfing in Peru. That's, a valid guess based on the words that you see here. So, like Carrie said, none of this matters if it's right or wrong. It's not about being right or wrong. It's just about engaging with the act of making a prediction. So, and honestly, it's really fun if they are way off base, because sometimes those lead to the most fun conversations ever. So let them go way off base and be silly. Like that's totally fine. And I actually prefer it that way.
I also do.
And then talk a little bit about our map talk activity. So this was actually shared with us by Abra Cook. Where's she from, Carrie? Remind me.
She's from Ohio.
Ohio. So Abra, Carrie, you can tell this better than I. She was a National Geographic Fellow. What was her title?
Certification candidate.
Okay.
She's a National Geographic certified educator. And to get National Geographic certified, which I totally recommend, all that you do is sign up for the certification and you create a lesson plan using National Geographic resources. And April was really a fan of the maps that they had on the National Geographic site. So in her unit, she chose to use the National Geographic maps and to do a map talk because, well, it helps students, orient themselves to where this book is taking place.
And when I do map talks with students, I like to start with, I'm from Michigan, so obviously my students are as well. I like to start with Michigan. And we look at things in our own area that there might be some comparisons or contrasts that we can make with the map that we're going to be looking at. I really like to do that because it gets students used to talking about things like topography, geography, words like city, state, country.
And even the difference in like state and province, what do the different countries call their divisions of their country?
Yeah. So it's a great way to get some vocab in that is kind of sometimes hard to work into your lessons. Words like north, east, southwest. So we talk about our own state of Michigan, and then we move to, in this case, we're talking about Peru because that's where Yama and friends are doing their exploring. And it's just, it's an amazing way to not only help them become familiar with the geographic area that they're going to be reading about, they're also learning a bunch of new vocabulary. And they're also learning geography, which like so many kids, like when I remember when I would read Robo en la Noche with my students, and honestly, like 9 out of 10 of them thought Costa Rica was an island. So, it's just like they have so many misconceptions about like what the world looks like. And we just don't look at maps like we used to. So I really like that they're getting some content area knowledge in addition to the language. And if you do these, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, that's just it's going to reinforce every time you do a map talk, all of that geography stuff that you had previously introduced the previous time that you did a map talk. So give it a try. It's super cool. And I just also want to give a shout out to Ben Tinsley, who has also kind of, I feel like he and Abra kind of independently developed their own concept of what map talk was going to be.
Agreed.
Ben does a lot of cultural stuff within his map talk. So he does a lot of talking about, the population and, what are
the music and the instruments.
yeah. Just, I swear he can work like anything into the map talk, and it's just so cool. And honestly, if you ever get a chance to see him speak, I recommend it, because he often will do a demo of his map talk techniques. And it's really been eye-opening for me to watch somebody do this in a different type of way.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So when we
pacing.
do, go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, Carrie. I stepped on your toe. Go ahead.
That's okay. When we do pacing, we just want to do manageable chunks. Sometimes you get a book that's long. I have really the last few years been kind of embracing the 10 chapters and less kind of story, because I feel like that's a manageable chunk for me in my classroom. But when you have a little bit longer book, or even in a shorter book, if one chapter is really, really long, like 8 or 10 pages long, sometimes it's okay to stop at kind of a natural stopping point and pick it back up the next day. I actually like to do the reading, kind of what did we read yesterday? And then do the reading, and then have like a brain break at the end. And the brain break for me is the activity that I use to follow up. So you can do comprehension questions. You can do a worksheet of them. If you've lost your voice like I have, Friday may very well for me be a worksheet day, because I'm not sure if I'll still be able to talk. But today we played a game. We played numbered heads together. They answered all of the questions on their whiteboards. So it was the same as a vocab or as a comprehension worksheet, but I got to go over them then and say, oh yeah, everybody's right. Oh, I hadn't thought about that one. You're right. The mom did say that, or the stepmom did say that to Wilhelm Kahlo. And so it is a chance to get more repetitions of the structure in the story. Add a little extra time. If you have a challenging section, take it slow. You're going to teach the reader. You could do 25 days teaching Yama and Lima, just teaching a chapter a day, and then maybe going slow and having, some cultural follow-up. Or you could do it even faster and just do the chapter and a fun game, and the chapter and a fun game every day to get through the work. The important thing is just to remember it varies as much as we do. The way you like to read at home, if you're a cover to cover reader, you may want to be a cover to cover reader in your classroom. If you're kind of a chapter a night as you have time, you might be a chapter when you have time in the classroom too. And there's no wrong.
I'm a read until my eyes close.
I am too. Or until it's morning and I finished the book.
Right. There's no in between, right?
No.
So there are some fun ways that you can occasionally change things up when you're reading too. One activity that I like to do, and I wouldn't do this super often, I would do this maybe once or twice a semester at most, it's called mixing bowl reading. So what I have my students do is I have them sit in 2 concentric circles. So the inside circle chairs are facing out, and the outside circle chairs are facing in. You can also have students just be standing to do this. I personally like to use chairs because it forces them to go to a place and not be all squirrely. So if you have chairs that you can set up this way, I recommend it. I, as the teacher, I like to stand in the middle, and that way I can really observe all of the pairs that are working. So every student has whatever they're reading, whether it be a chapter in a book or a sheet of paper, whatever it is. And the person that they're sitting across from, I have them start reading together. They can read however they want. If they want to read it in the target language out loud, they can. If they want to read it in translation, they can do that. I really don't care. The only thing I tell them is that both partners have to comprehend whatever they read. So I don't want them to move forward unless both people are comprehending, and it's very handy that I'm standing right in the middle of the circle. So if they need me, they can get me over there real quick. Whenever I give them the signal, the outer circle people stand up and move 1 chair to the right, and then they show their new partner where they left off reading with their previous partner. Whichever one of the 2 new partners didn't get as far, that's where they pick up and start reading. So it slows down the really fast readers, And it gives people that need a little bit more eyes on text, a little bit more time to process, and maybe even processing it for a second time. What's also really nice is the entire class wraps up at the same moment because they've all been forced to go back and start reading wherever they left off. So I've done this activity a couple of different times when I had administrators observing me, and it was a hit both times. So if you need to do an observation lesson, this one worked well for me, so give it a try. The other aspect to reading that I think is super important for all of us to think about is comprehension checks. So how do we do them? When do we do them? How often do we do them? You can do a comprehension check after a sentence, after a paragraph, after a page, after an entire chapter. There's no set time that you need to stop and do a comprehension check. For me, comprehension checks are just a very natural part of the reading process. Like I'm not necessarily sitting there thinking about, oh, I should do a comprehension check now. Like it's kind of become just like second nature, that I know when I need to check in with the kids. So in a novice classroom, they're going to need a lot more scaffolding. You can even use English with a novice. You can even just say, like, can you tell me what I just said? Can you tell me what this word means? You can offer them two choices. Oh gosh, don't do this. I've heard this means something. 6, 7. I'm not, we're not doing that here. Sorry. Anyway, I like to offer them choices, and yes, this is my gesture for offering choices. Did this happen? Or did this happen? So we're giving them two options, and that way they don't have to come up with the language on their own. It's kind of, they're just making the choice between two things. I also like to just start saying a sentence and then kind of give them the verbal cue that I'm expecting them to fill it in and let them finish the sentence for me. But sometimes the easiest way to check comprehension is just to say, hey, can you translate that for me? Can you tell me what this means? What does this word mean? Intermediate students are going to be able to start doing more higher order thinking skills types of comprehension checks. So you can ask them things like, which character do you think made the better decision? Or how would you feel if you were in that situation? Or is there somewhere else in the world where this happens? Or is there a movie where this happens? So they clearly have to comprehend what's going on in the reading in order to answer questions like those. So not only are you getting them to think, but you're also getting information that you as the teacher need. Are they getting this? Is it okay if I move forward? Or do I need to go back and, do some like talking comprehension wise? Like, do I need to go back through like the sequence of events and review with them, make sure that they're all understanding before I start to move forward? The moment we've all been waiting for, post-reading.
It's the fun stuff. This is what we told you, your dessert. You lived through all of the hard work. Now you get some quick and easy, low to no prep activities you can use with any reader that you're reading at any time. And so it could be something like a draw a scene. It could be something like an order the events. It could be finding text evidence. The girls that you see in this image are actually doing an activity of Kristy's that is in several of our teacher guides at Wayside. It's called the scene machine. And so what they've done, I have them hold their books. We read the chapter. They still have their books. Anything we can do to get them back in that text. And so I tell them, okay, we just finished chapter 7. So each of you in your group of 4 are going to pick a scene from chapters 1 through 7. It can be any scene, but your group has to have 4 different scenes. So together they all pick out their scenes. Then each student draws an illustration that represents the scene that they chose. They use the text then to take 2 index cards and write a sentence. For level 1 and 2, I would have them copy the sentences directly from the text that describe the event that they have now drawn. For
Carrie,
levels 3 and 4,
I've had classes that couldn't even handle copying from the text. So I have occasionally just typed out my 2 sentences and given them the slips of paper too. So
And
we do what we have to do.
We do what we have to do. And then it's like a board game. You have, if they're in groups of 4 and you have a class of 30, you have then, 8 groups with a couple of 3s and then the rest 4s. And so they have a game board. They put their cards in the center face down and they move from board to board, and they're rereading again all of those events from the text and matching them up with the illustrations that their classmates have done. So it's a super fun way to draw a scene and then revisit the text, reading and acquiring that vocab again.
I also used to have my students, when they would do an activity like this, I would have them take a photo of each one that they did, and they would upload them into a Google Drive folder and share it with me. I never looked at those. I did not care to see them, but it kind of held them a little bit feeling accountable. Like, she's going to be checking. We better do a good job with this.
Yeah.
This is an activity that this is one of my favorite things to do. It's called freeze frame. And what I do is I get my students to pose, and I don't even necessarily need to tell them what they're doing or why they're doing it. I just grab a few kids. I have some props that I've pre-selected, and I'm like, okay, you look through this window that's actually at the back of a chair, and then I want you kids to sit here. You're going to be wearing this mask, and I'm going to take a photo, just super quick. Then what I do is, either as a foreshadowing to what we're going to be reading or as a review of something we've already read, I just put them on a Google slide and project it, and we talk about what's happening in that scene. It's instant engagement because they're looking at their classmates. They love to get dressed up and put masks on and things like that too. So it's just a really fun and funny way to review what's happening. And you can actually use these photos. If you have a small enough school, you can probably use them for the next 3 or 4 years, because my kids all knew each other, and we would have like little brothers, little sisters that would recognize their siblings or their friends' siblings. And so this would be fun to even look back on past years.
I like to compile the photos. If I have I have 3 sections of Spanish 3 right now. So if I take them in all 3 classes, I can review that chapter 3 different times by going through and talking about the different ways that the kids in the different classes acted it out. And they love it when they're seeing their friends who don't get to have class with them.
And you can even, let's say you have 3 sets of pictures, you can talk about the first 2 sets and then maybe have them do like a partner retell with the 3rd set of freeze frames. So that way they're then having to recall what happened in the chapter. So there's lots of fun things you can do. I even used to take these same photos and I would use them on assessments and things. I mean, like, I like to just make them pop up in all kinds of places because they're fun.
They are fun.
This game is a classic. The marker partner game. Now you can use a marker, you can use a pencil, you can use a little Beanie Baby or some kind of small, something that can be placed in the middle of students and you can grab it with one hand. That's all you need. And I always used my dead dry erase markers. I had a special bin for my dead markers, and that was what we used to play the marker partner game. So you simply have your students sit in 2 rows. You can have them sit in chairs or you can have them sit on the floor. The floor was the easiest for me. I instructed them to sit far enough away from the person across from them that if they both bent all the way forward, their heads would not touch, because I didn't want any concussions in Spanish class. So and this is a good way to use any random list of true false questions. So if you've got a list of true false questions like in a teacher's guide, and you're like, I don't feel like giving this quiz, I'd rather play a game, you can use it for this. So you make a statement, and if the statement is true, Carrie, help me, I'm gonna get this wrong.
There's 2 ways. You can do true and they just grab the marker.
Or you can do, if it's false, they grab the marker.
Yes.
Right.
But if if you do the true and they grab the marker, then the team with the most markers gets a point. So if the team on the right gets 7 and the other team gets 6, then the team on the right gets the point. If you do false, they get the marker, and the team with the most gets the point. But then if one of the people that grabbed the marker can also explain why it's false, then you can give them a bonus point. So I like to do marker partner. I like to do with true and false, like the true answer. And I use a beanie baby when I want to give them the false answer. So that way they have like a visual separation between, okay, it's the beanie babies, we're going false. It's the markers, we're going true.
I always did grab it if it's false. So like, I know there are multiple ways that people play this. So it gets confusing at times, but
it just goes to show you can do anything and it's fine.
I know, seriously.
There's
so many things that you can do. If you have a set of comprehension questions, it doesn't matter, multiple choice, true, false, open-ended, you can take those and play any type of game with them. And I'm going to let Carrie show you the last game that we have for you.
So this one is another one. Anything. If you did a cultural reading and it had true, false, or, a comprehension question set, if you've done a reader and you've done a chapter and it has a comprehension question set, anything that has comprehension questions, all that you do, you need about 12 to 13 questions. Each group, about 4 kids in a group, each group gets a whiteboard and a marker and an eraser. And you ask the question and they write down their answers and you check all of the answers, and everybody correct then goes to the little box and gets a cup, and they start to try and build their tower. Their goal is to have the tallest standing tower. The first few rounds, it's so fast. They just put the cup down. After about round 4, you need to set a timer so that they know that they have specific build times. So they get about 30 seconds to set their timer up. It's fun because even if a kid misses a question in their group, they can still win, because when it comes down to the end, there's a tower of 12 and there's a tower of 11 and there's a tower of 10, and the other kids are trying to get the tallest tower. So they have to try and place their cup to keep the lead. So if the 11 tries to put on the 12 and they place it, and then the 12 tries to put on the 13 and it falls down, now your 10 group can put their 11 on in their second. So it's fun to watch them try to decide, do I put this cup on?
They love it. It does get a little loud, I will warn you.
It does.
So,
but I like that. I like when they love it so much that they're loud.
Yeah. And they're engaged and they're using the target language. So it's perfect. And it doesn't matter what color cups you have.
No.
I had this set. I bought it on Amazon.
I did
It's
too.
a big party pack of cups. You can use the red cups. It doesn't matter what color they are. You can use building blocks if you want. It doesn't matter. Just something that they can build.
And it big blocks though, so they fall down.
Yeah. That would make a lot more noise than the cups.
That would,
too.
yes.
So, yeah. So those are our activities that we brought to share with you tonight. And we do have about 2 minutes left in our webinar. So if any of you have any questions, feel free to drop your question either in the meeting chat or in the Q&A. And Carrie and I would be delighted to answer any questions that you have.
Yes.
Well,
thank you so much for spending your Wednesday with us. What a fun way to spend the evening. It was nice to see you.
It was for us, at least. I hope you guys had fun too. Just a little housekeeping while I'm waiting to see if anybody has any questions. This webinar was recorded, so you will be receiving a copy of the recording. Within the next few days, you're also going to be receiving an email where you're going to get access to an edited version of this webinar, as well as a booklet that Carrie and I have prepared to kind of walk you through some of the concepts that we presented to you tonight. And we also added some discussion questions in the booklet. So if you are watching this with other members of your department, or if you'd like to use the recording of this webinar to share with maybe your PLC at school or your department, you can do that, and you have some questions to get some discussion started. So hopefully you will enjoy that, and keep your eyes on your email inbox from Wayside as well, because we are going to have, and I think this email just went out this afternoon, actually, we're going to be having some free Hispanic Heritage Month reading activities, and we have levels 1 through 4 for Spanish, and we also have some AP activities coming your way. So hopefully there will be some great stuff that you can use and make your lives a little bit easier.
And Pamela put the Érase una vez link into the chat, and the Érase una vez link will take you to where you can check the curriculum out, and you can get sample. I'm not sure exactly what's in the sample, but they do have a sample of the Érase una vez curriculum if you'd like to
you
check
can
that
actually
out.
do a trial. And so if you
And
follow
readers
that
are
link,
on sale right now. 2 for 1. So it's a
that's what
good
we're
time to
advertising.
stock up on
You
readers.
need to contact your state rep from Wayside, and you can find out who your state rep is by going to waysidepublishing.com. Readers are buy 2, get 1 at no cost, and there's no limit. But you do have to go through your state sales rep to get that special deal. So lots of fun stuff going on, and
all the things
Pamela
that you
shared the
saw
link about the Hispanic Heritage free resources, so go grab those and enjoy.
And all the things that we talked about are part of the Érase una vez program. So you can do all the pre-readings, the games and activities. These are the kinds of things that are included, whether you do the Érase una vez or the individual readers and guides.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. And hopefully we'll see you soon.
Have a great
Bye,
night.
everyone.